This episode of Harvey Brownstone Interviews is brought to you by the Harvey Brownstone Talk Show Blend Coffee, available at hollywoodblends.com. Everyone's saying it's the best coffee they've ever tasted. Why not give it a try and see for yourself?
Hello, everyone. I'm Harvey Brownstone, and today's guest is a very special young man who came into my life several months ago when he invited me to appear as a guest on his very popular podcast, The DJ Bob Show. I was so impressed with his passion for pop culture and his intelligence, sense of humor, resilience, and commitment to the art of interviewing that I just had to invite him on our show. When he was only 15 years old, he started his podcast, and now, even though he's only 29, he's already in his 14th year hosting the DJ Bob Show, which celebrates every aspect of pop culture, past and present. So far, he's conducted close to 1,400 interviews with well-known personalities in the world of music, television, and film. And his interviews always speak to us on a personal level because of the unique and refreshing perspective he brings to his subjects. Despite the considerable challenges of living with cerebral palsy, our guest has found a meaningful, original, and positive way not only to enjoy his life, but to contribute to the world of broadcasting, and at the same time, he enhances our lives by sharing his knowledge of pop culture and his beautiful heart with all of us. I'm delighted to welcome to our show my dear friend, the host of the DJ Bob Show, Bob Runkel. Bob, thank you so much for being here.
Long-time listener, first-time caller. How are you?
I'm great. How are you?
I'm great.
Bob, I want to take you back to 2010 when you were only 15 years old. What made you decide to become a podcaster?
Well, that's the common misconception, is that when I started this show, it was live. It was a totally different format from what we do now. It was music, it was phone calls, it was me doing a radio show. So when I tell people that, they're kind of confused as to where the trajectory kind of happened, why it changed, and I'll get into that more. But
well, yeah, please do. Why did it change?
It changed because of my disability. I realized that live content takes a lot of emotional, physical stamina that I just couldn't deliver. And you have to know your limits.
So how is doing a podcast different for you?
It's on my own time. I crafted my setup, my audio setup, so that everything is done by the click of a mouse. There's no onboard gear. There's no, outboard gear. It's just one microphone, one button. Everything is easily accessible.
So, Bob, who are the interviewers that were role models for you when you were growing up?
Well, and this is kind of a cool full circle moment that I've kind of told on different podcasts, but I'll tell you here. So when I was 12 years old, I was interested in the world of internet radio. It was very much in its infancy, and I found this show called Radio KOL. And Radio KOL was a children's online radio show for 4 hours a day, 5 days a week. 30 million kids were listening a week. That was unheard of from 2003 to 2007. And one of the other highlights is they were the first webcast to do video for kids and for accessible audiences, which was crazy to me. So I listened to that show every week, and it was hosted by this brilliant British guy by the name of DJ Rick Adams. And I called in so much that he kind of knighted me my nickname, which is DJ Bob. So without him, you would not be talking to me right now.
So, were there other interviewers as well that you learned from? Because you've developed a very sophisticated and professional interviewing style, which, as you know, is not all that common out there in the world of podcasts.
Not at all. I mean, there are so many people. I mean, I look at people like Rosie O'Donnell. We talked a lot about her during our chat. And, you know, people like James Lipton. I love him because he gets right to the meat of it. There's no fluff, no filler.
Yeah, I love that so much. I really loved James Lipton on the Actors Studio. And of course, I'm older than you, so I remember people like Dick Cavett and David Frost and Johnny Carson. And
yeah, but you have to know your history. So I know those guys, I know those people too, because I'm not emulating what they do piece by piece. I'm extracting little pieces of parts of what they do and kind of concocting my own style.
well, it's really working because your audience just keeps growing and growing. Who have been some of your favorite guests on your show so far?
You know, that's hard to tell because, and I know people say that all the time, it's like picking your children, blah, 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 blah. That's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is a lot of my early work, because it was so early on in technology, it's lost. So I don't have a lot of the early stuff, but you know, I mean, there's a lot of people that I do so many interviews, but I guess the one that impacts me the most is, well, you're one of them, honestly, because that interview was a turning point for a lot of people.
Really? I'm so honored and touched that you would say that.
And I'm not just saying that because I'm here. Like it's one of the interviews where it's like, okay, I can kind of get out of that children's entertainment bubble and people will still, latch onto it. But aside from you, I think like one of my dearest friends is a Hollywood director by the name of Andy Fickman. He's responsible for producing Heathers on Broadway and other fun stuff like that. And we just had two separate interviews that were just beautiful. They were heartfelt. They were like in tune emotionally. It was just great. Another one, honorable mention, is with one of my heroes, author and illustrator Mark Brown, who is widely known as the author and illustrator of the Arthur book series. That was on a bucket list that I had written 13 years ago, and we got him this past year. So another thing that I want to say is never give up.
Yeah, that's such an important message. You know, you mentioned the interview that you did of me, which was a great honor for me. You made a very important impact on people during that interview because you have a way of creating an emotional connection with your guests. I'm not saying it's always the same. And for me, it doesn't always happen that there is this emotional connection. But when it does happen, you're really creating magic because there's this friendship that's forming in real time.
And we always talk, you and I talk all the time off air. And one of the things that I want to say is that I never used to have that emotional component to my podcast at all. I was so stiff, so stilted. So I'm glad that I finally let out vulnerability a little more.
I think that's what your audience wants to see and hear. Tell me, do you find it difficult to get famous celebrities to appear on the show?
Yes. Full stop. Yes. Because it's just you don't know what when they get the email, you don't know if they're you could tell when they listen to it, when they do their research, when they kind of background check you, so to speak. But other times they don't respond. And you're like, what did I do wrong? So there's a lot of that, but there's also like a lot of like timing is everything. You have to make sure they're promoting something that is viable, that is worth your and your listeners' time. And you have to kind of play the game of like, okay, when will this work? Be strategic about it.
Is it getting easier to get the guests that you want now that you're so well established?
That, and I've gotten away from the whole, oh my, I'm such a huge fan of you. Can I, you know, talk to you about episode 500 and like like the really like nerdy side of it. And yeah, it comes out because that's me, but it's not how I lead.
No, because you're in the business yourself. You're a professional. So it's okay to be a fan. And I have to confess, I often let the fan side of me overtake the interviewer side of me. But I'm sure that for the celebrities, they're so used to hearing that it doesn't really impress them.
But on the flip side of that, if you are a big fan and you reference a deep cut reference, they're like, how did you know that? Or why do you care about this?
That's true. I've had that said to me many times, actually.
And that's always fun because then they know that you're not just reading off their Wikipedia article and calling it a day.
Correct. Well, you certainly do your research. I can testify to that. You know, Bobby, everybody asks me this question. So I'm going to ask you.
Okay.
If you could interview anybody in the world, living or dead, who would be your number one choice?
That is so hard because you're you're going across so many different areas. But one of mine is LeVar Burton.
LeVar Burton.
Yeah.
Why?
Because everybody knows him for something. For if you're a kid and you watched PBS for 25 years, you watched him on Reading Rainbow. If you're a boomer, you saw him on Rooks or Star Trek or whatever. And he just seems like the kindest human being.
Well, that's a good choice. I want to mention the fact that your show is an audio podcast only, not video. Why haven't you gone to the video format?
That's difficult for me because there's a lot of stuff with me that I'm so self-conscious to go on video because of physical ticks and jerks. And I just don't want it. When it happens, I get embarrassed that it does. So it's an anxiety thing that I'm still working towards. It's kind of emotional for me, actually, but
Well, I'm really honored that you chose to do our show knowing that it was video. I have to say that I think getting to see you, getting to see those beautiful eyes, that beautiful smile enhances your show. your presentation, your personality. So I hope that one day you will overcome those worries, because people see through all of that in the way that they saw through Stephen Hawking's and other people who may have conditions. It's nothing that should obstruct you from just being yourself.
I feel like when it is highlighted, when it is brought up, if I can get really honest with you, it reminds me that I'm disabled. You know what I'm saying?
I see you as differently abled, not disabled.
And I appreciate that, but it's something on the emotional front, and I've gotten better. I mean, heck, I'm doing this, which is a big step. But I'm not ready. I'm not ready yet, but I'm also not against it, which is good.
Well, my hope is that your fans, your followers, your viewers who are going to watch this interview and who are not used to seeing you are going to give you the feedback that I'm giving you to encourage you to make yourself more visible, because you're a beautiful person, Bob.
Thank you. Thank you. And if I can, I mean, I know that we said we weren't going to make this all gushy, but I'm going to go there. You've given me so much confidence that I can't thank you enough.
Well, you're getting me all emotional, but believe me, I have gotten much more from you than I've given. You're in your 14th year as an interviewer, as a podcaster. Have you seen an evolution in your style as an interviewer?
Oh, yes. Oh, yes. In fact, so a lot of my early interviews were based around the idea of 1990s nostalgia within children's television, right?
Right.
And the thing that I find interesting is that when I talk to somebody, one story comes to mind. I talked to my dear friend who's a brilliant puppeteer and a brilliant performer, voice actor, stage actor. His name is Tyler Bunch. And when I had him back on after 10 years of not joining me, he said to me, I was expecting that kid was a fan of me and was a fanboy. You surprised me. I love this conversation way more.
So what do you attribute that to? Is it just more experience, or is it more maturity as you've grown up?
It's the simple idea that they're people. They're people just like you, just like me, who happen to do some really cool stuff that we like. That's it.
So that keeps you from getting intimidated or too nervous.
But on the flip side, when I talk to somebody like Mark Brown, at the end of the interview, I asked him for an autograph because it was so monumental for me that I turned into a fan, and he was so appreciative of that because nobody asked him for an autograph, and he drew me a portrait of the character for me. Like, what?
Well,
So you have to, as hard as it is to not be a fanboy, you gotta let it out.
I'm glad to hear you say that, because I do very frequently. Bob, I'm going to speak frankly with you. In the last, I would say, 5 years, since the advent of Zoom, we have seen literally thousands of podcasts popping up everywhere, hosted by amateurs who, in my opinion, have absolutely no interviewing skills whatsoever. and they clutter the internet and they make it really hard for the really good shows to stand out. Do you find that as frustrating as I do?
You know my answer, but yes. Yes. Because when I work, okay, here's a good example. When I see a podcast get a guest that I wanted for X amount of years, and I listen, and they're not doing what I would do or close to what I would do or how I would ask, it's like, why are you here and why am I not getting it?
That's hard. Yeah, that's hard. I get that totally. What do you think? Are you able to articulate the qualities of a good interviewer?
The one thing I will say, kind of prefacing what I'm about to say, is that there's no guidebook. There's no guidebook. You can watch as many interviews as you want, read as many books, memoirs that you want, but ultimately, the ball is in your court. So, but I would say you got to listen to what the other person is saying. You can't drift off into la la land and wait till they're done speaking, because they might say something really interesting that you can refer back to later, and that might help you in your process.
Yeah, that's really the important quality, I think, is to be such a good listener, which you are and which I try to be. Now, in 2018, you wrote a groundbreaking article entitled How Podcasting with a Disability Has Helped Me, which was featured on Yahoo and on the mighty.com website. Bob, can you tell us how you feel your cerebral palsy has factored into the uniqueness of your show?
Well, can I kind of go back and tell you a bit about that article and why I wrote it and what it helped me do after it came out?
Sure.
That article was the first time I ever expressed my cerebral palsy out there to anyone. It just was. And I wasn't ashamed of it. I just didn't feel the need to talk about it. It was never a thought in my head, you know? So I write this and then I start talking about it more because it's a part of me. It's giving me opportunities because I have CP. I have all this time to create, to to foster my love of this stuff. If I didn't have CP, if I wasn't stuck in the house as a kid, would I have time to be watching these shows that I'm doing interviews for? Probably not so much. So it really guided me. So I wrote that article and it changed my whole perspective, because it was the first time I saw something I did impact people.
Well, it's very impactful. You know, there may be a lot of people out there who really don't know that much about cerebral palsy, which is a condition affecting a person's ability to move and maintain balance and posture. Can you tell us what a typical day is like for you?
Oh, a typical day. Well, it starts out with me. I still live at home. I'd like to give a shout out to my mother, who I know we affectionately call DJ Mom. So there's that. So I get up and, I'm usually in here. This is my home base. I have a bedroom and I have I have a separate room that is my studio, where all of the, sounds so cliche, but magic happens. And then, like, there are some times where, I'm not having a good day. A huge part of CP is random body aches where you can't control what your body does. at all. Let me give you an example. So, my cerebral palsy affects all four limbs. I'm quadriplegic. So, let's say I'm talking to someone while I'm getting dressed, right? And my mom said, I'm talking, I'm getting all excited. Let's talk let's just say this. I'm telling someone about the interview I'm doing right now. I'm getting so excited that the rest of my body is tensing up because my body is focused on what I'm saying rather than you have to move your leg this way to put your pants on. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So sometimes my mom will say to me, look, I know you're excited, but once you're in your chair, you can talk about it because otherwise you're going to hurt yourself. So, and that's hard because I'm a talker, but you got to do what you have to do.
Well, I remember you telling me, Bob, early on in our friendship, that although obviously cerebral palsy plays a major role in your life, you don't want to be seen as the poster child for CP, and you don't really see it as particularly relevant to your role as an interviewer, correct?
No. I mean, look, I'm going to be candid with you. I in the past I've dated a couple of disability advocates and I could not stand, you know, the whole disability advocacy kind of mentality because your disability becomes you in that way. Some quote that I always like to say, and if you read my article, you know, I wrapped it up with let your disability be in the background and press record. And that's really what I want to do above all else.
That's very profound. You have not allowed your disability to define you, and you're really quite an inspiration. You
I also can't ignore my disability either. It's there.
It's there,
You
but
know,
it doesn't define you.
yeah. But I don't pretend that you know what I mean? Like I'm fully aware that I'm in a wheelchair right now. I'm fully aware that, you know, I have to get cleaned a different way. I know all that stuff. And, but you're right. I don't say, for me, I have this disability. Yes, I have moments in my life where it's like, I wish I wasn't in the situation that I'm in, which you know all too well. But I think I'm proud of it now.
And I'm proud of you, Bob. You know, here you are, you're 29 years old. Your show's been going strong for 14 years. You just keep getting better and better. Your audience keeps growing. You've now got close to 30,000 listeners every single week, which is very impressive because you don't advertise. What's the long term goal? Where do you see yourself in 5 years?
Well, something that I've always wanted to, I can't believe I've never brought this up in one of our conversations. So I'm gonna bring it up here now. You get an exclusive. Um,
Thank you.
Yay! So something that I always want to let people know is that my podcast, we always talk about how if I can go behind the curtain a little bit, you and I always talk about how, you know, how much of yourself do you insert into your podcast? You and I talk about that all the time.
Yeah, we do.
And one of the things that I neglect to say to you, and I don't know why, one of the reasons why I do it is because my audience has been with me through health scares, through relationship issues, as well as listening to my show. So they're really a part of the journey. More so than a typical podcast would. You know?
Well, I think that makes people want to get to know you more. I mean, your guests come and go, but you're the constant in the show. You're the one that we keep coming back to. So I love the fact that you've struck a balance between being the podcaster and also being Bob that we get to know and who becomes our friend.
Could I share a quick story with you? I don't know how we are on time, but I just thought of this as we were discussing. So in 2011, we were only a couple months in. I had a health scare where my heart grew too big for my body.
Oh, Bob.
And it was scary because it started out as a viral infection and then it turned into that. And we were scared. We were worried. So I went to the hospital panicking, worried sick. And then a couple days later, I told my sister, bring my laptop and my microphone. I want to do show live from the hospital. So, as the nurses came in, I was doing a show. So I never gave up, even then. Even in the hard times of not knowing what to do.
So then back to my question, where do you see yourself in 5 years? Professionally.
Well, one of our goals is to get trademarked and become an LLC. That's up there. And just get paid, get ad revenue, get all the things that I deserve and our show deserves. Because that's what being on the journey is all about. Too. Watching the growth.
Absolutely. Well, I can tell you that I will be in the front row watching that growth. I want to tell our viewers that you can listen to the DJ Bob Show by going to the website djbobshow.com and clicking on episodes. The DJ Bob Show is also available on every major streaming platform, including Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Podcasts, and Amazon Music.
And you don't know how long that took.
But it was worth it.
Yes.
Well, my dear Bob, I'm so grateful to have you as my dear friend, my colleague. I've learned so much from you. It's been such a pleasure having you on our show. Congratulations on the success of the DJ Bob Show. I wish you continued success with the show. I look forward to having you back with every new milestone. And I thank you so much for being my very dear friend and for taking the time to appear on our show.
Of course. And this is the lesson. Who knows where an email will take you? Because if I hadn't sent that email to your team, who knows what would have happened. So thank you so much.
I'm so grateful that you did. Our guest has been Bob Runkel, host of the very popular podcast, The DJ Bob Show, which can be heard on every major podcast platform. My name is Harvey Brownstone. Thank you to my producer, Steve Silver, my director of programming, Deborah Batsafin, my production assistant, Rosa Puzo, my PR directors, Eileen Shapiro and Jimmy Starr, and my entire team at the XBTV1 network in the UK. Thank you all for joining us. See you next time.
Thanks for watching. Be sure to check out all the great interviews on the Harvey Brownstone Interviews YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and ring the bell to be notified when new videos are posted.